What's good? It's your butt.
What?
What's good? It's your boy Trouble T Roy. Hit Don't Get Hit Boxing Talk. We back with another one. Let's go. So, just finally finished listening to this Derrick James interview with Fight Hub. That was about 2 days ago, I want to say, from this time right now. Very interesting. It's about a 20-minute interview. You can go check it out if you want to. It's an interesting listen, to say the least. He goes in, talks about Ryan Garcia, talks about Anthony Joshua, talks about Spence, talks about Jermell Charlo, talks about his time as trainer of the year and, what it took to get to that and, what came after, Yeah, he touches a few things, but the things that stood out to me the most was, the trainer of the year talk and the talk about Earl Spence and, what's coming up for him and the talk about Jermall Charlo and coming off of his loss to Canelo. So basically, he made an interesting point about, being trainer of the year and the different views that have been, I guess, thrown at him about being trainer of the year last year and then taking, some losses this year. And he made a pretty straightforward point about that. He was like, what helped him become trainer of the year, which is really what helps any trainer become trainer of the year, was his consistency. He did have two reigning champions at one time, in Jermell Charlo at 154, who continued on to get all the way to the top of the division and become a 154 undisputed champion. And then he also had Earl Spence Jr., who went on as a reigning champion for about 7 years to unify three of the four belts in the welterweight division. So he is right about that. The consistency over the years, with them, mainly in his corner, is what got him to that point of trainer of the year. And of course, like a lot of things, some things come to an end. Like a lot of things, things come to an end. Like a lot of good things, I should say, things come to an end. And that's what happened. He took a couple of losses this year. Had kind of a shaky performance with another one of his fighters, and Frank Martin, in my opinion. It's just one of those things. Being trainer of the year, the consistency is always good, but one thing they say, once you get to the top, there's only one way you could go from there, and that's down. And that's kind of what happened with him. And it's not saying anything bad about him, because I don't think any trainer of the year has ever just continually reigned as trainer of the year for year after year after year after. So it's just one of those things. It was a good recognition for him at the time. He was recognized at the right time, and that was good for him. And he accepts that, he took some losses, just like he says, everyone takes losses. So, it is what it is with that. And then, the interviewer with Fight Hub, who, I don't know if I said that's who was Fight Hub TV was the interviewers. They get into the Earl Spence Crawford talk. And I believe this is his first time speaking on Earl Spence Crawford since the fight. I'm not sure if he spoke in public about it with anyone else. This is my first time hearing him finally speak on it. And again, as far as I'm concerned, he spoke some facts as far as, him saying how he felt about the fight and what he saw, what he believes happened, what he witnessed from, his point of view is that he said, he basically said Crawford just had the better game plan that night. He was the better fighter, had the better game plan that night, which is true. He said no excuses. He said he claims that they will be fighting at 154 in the rematch. The rematch is happening at 154. At least that's what, to his knowledge, that's what he says. And he says that he believes Earl Spence will be in a lot better shape and he won't be drained. But he says that was not the issue for the first fight. He said out of his own mouth, he basically said that Crawford had the better game plan and he was the better fighter of the night. He said no excuse, all that other stuff, being Earl Spence being drained and all that other stuff is just that ain't it. So he cleared up the air with that one, which makes sense. As a trainer, you realize things like that. He probably seen some things he could have done better as a trainer himself. You know what I'm saying? And obviously he's probably going to look to improve on his parts in the rematch. So, we'll see how that works out for him. Always wish him the best with that, And then he gets to the Jermell Charlo versus Canelo fight. They ask him about that next. And this is where, for me, the interview kind of spirals a little out of where I think it was in the first place. It kind of spirals away from where I think things were making sense to some other place, because he starts talking about the way Jermell performed, and he's just getting into this whole thing where he gets to a point, it's like he's talking in circles with this fight, and he's making it like, well, he asked one thing that was very particularly kind of boggling to me. He says something like, how often do you see somebody have a bad day and make their biggest payday at the same time? Or he says something like that, and it's like, okay, that's where it kind of throws me off, because you go from talking being trainer of the year to talking about Earl Spence and how there was no excuses in his performance and all that, to making a comment like this, talking about paydays and Jermell Charlo having his bigged payday, and it's not really a loss if you have. Now you turn it into, it's not about the fight. It's more about, well, he's had his biggest payday. He's set for life. He's good to go. So it's almost like, now if me looking from the outside in, I have to kind of look at him as a trainer, and it starts making me put things together, because you didn't have a great game plan yourself. You admitted that Crawford and Bomac had the better game plan, whereas in the same fight, it looks like you had no game plan for Spence at all. And looking back, we could go back and talk about how you said yourself that you don't watch film. Now, another thing about that, which I thought was funny, before I get back into the Charlo thing, is that you said you don't watch film back way before the fight happened, or back before the first fight happened with Crawford and Spence, which didn't make sense at all. But judging by the way Spence performed and your corner worked with him, that's very believable, because it looked like you guys had no clue. It looked like I'm not talking to them specifically, obviously they probably ain't gonna hear this, but it looked like they had no clue what they were doing in that ring with Crawford. No game plan, no ways on adjusting to what was going on in the ring. Nothing. It looked like they showed up with nothing. That's showing up for a test that you didn't study for at all. You have no clue what the subject is, no clue what type of problems, what style of whatever, nothing. You just showing up. you know. And so, again, going back to the talk about trainer of the year and being a trainer and the consistency, is like, okay, your consistency literally stopped basically right there because you went from trainer of the year to not having a plan for your fighter at all in the ring. Now, which brings me to Jermell Charlo versus Canelo. Once again, now you're talking about Charlo and making money off of the fight. You're more focused, it sounded like in the interview, he was more focused on, yeah, well, he made his money though. Like, okay, but once again, for another fight, another one of your biggest fights, the biggest fight probably between Errol Spence and Crawford, Jermell and Canelo, those are the two biggest fights of your life, and it seems like you as a trainer, you didn't show up. You had no game plan for Canelo. Same as with Crawford. No game plan. Charlo shows up, and it's like he just showed up to show up. Only difference is between those two fights is one of your fighters stood on his 10 toes and took whatever was given to him, and the other fighter tiptoed around the ring for 12 rounds. You know what I'm saying? But these are your fighters. These are the guys that you're training. This is trainer of the year right here. Basically admitting that you really had nothing for these fights. Nothing for your fighters in the biggest moments of their lives. So that kind of just bothered me as I listened to the whole thing. And then going back to the video thing, he goes back into speaking about that in this interview. And it's like I don't know how, I can't remember how it got to watching fighters and watching their videos and all that stuff, but he breaks down to saying, I only watch the big fights, you know, when it comes to my fighters. It was some weird, it was just, he kind of started going all around in circles, but he said something like, I watch the big fights, I don't watch all the fights, I only watch the fights that matter, and blah, blah. It's like, so I'm not really sure. He kind of, after a while, it's like I see what happens with him, especially like with Derrick James in the interviews, especially with stuff that he doesn't want to answer or stuff that he doesn't have an answer for. He starts to go around in these circles and stuff like that. And this stuff just starts not making sense. It's like now you're just piling a bunch of words together just to make it seem like you're trying to get somewhere when really you're not getting anywhere with the whole thing, because the matter of fact in this whole thing is that you as a trainer didn't, you know, show up for the biggest fights of your fighters' careers and of your career as a trainer. You just didn't show up as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I said the interview was good in certain parts, but those are the things that stuck out for me. Those are the things that stuck out. But I'm glad that he did, going back to the Spence Crawford thing, I am glad that he did clear that up and let everybody know how he felt, and letting us know that he didn't have no excuses for Errol Spence's defeat for Errol Spence as the fighter and for himself as a trainer. He said that Terrence Crawford had the better game plan and he was the better fighter, basically. He was the man that night and can't go back and change that. He can only move forward. That's one thing he was consistent with the interview, is you can't keep looking back at the past. You keep moving forward. Everybody takes L's. You keep moving forward. You know, so that's one thing I can't give him. He does that perspective is true. You always gotta just keep on moving forward. Things happen, leave them behind, move forward. So, you know, interesting interview though. So yeah, I just felt like I'd speak on that real quick. Y'all watch the interview. Let me know what y'all think about it. Let me know how y'all felt. I'm sure a lot of people already watched it before I did, so although a lot of people probably have something to say about it or whatever. But yeah, man, like, comment, subscribe, share, and all that good shit. It's Trouble T. Roy. Hit, don't get hit, boxing talk. Be back for another one. All right, peace.
Gotta have legal defense, the flow kills. The guilty bystander proceeds with no guilt. All things forward, the movement got no chill. You dislike, no love lost, no spill. You heard it here from that foolie from Go Ill. Was such a dope sounder to have you on tilt. Backhanded beats for your automobile. Like this, I mean like so. You mean like Black Rob spoke like whoa. Like that, I believe we broke through it. New shit that rewrites hope. 10 times in a row, rewind flow. Landmark ain't simulator, we might flow. 10 times in a row,